what's up? My name is Daniela and today I'm going to do my March wrap-up. In March I read a total of 6 books and I would say I had a pretty awesome reading month. There will be timestamps below, but first let's take a look at the stats. So 2 of the books were contemporary, 1 was sci-fi, 1 was fantasy, 1 was dystopian and 1 was non-fiction. 3 were young adult and 3 were adult. 5 were physical and 1 was an audiobook. And considering the source, 3 of them were from my local library, 2 were from my own books and 1 was from SCRIBD. And as for the star rating, I had 1 2-star read, 2 4-star reads and 3 5-star reads. So the first thing I read in March was Saga Volume 6 by Brian K. Vaughen and Fiona Staples. In case you don't know, this is a graphic novel set in space and we follow 2 different species that are at war at each other, and there are also a lot of other species, but these 2 characters from 2 different species have a kid together, which is forbidden, and a lot of people are after them, so they are constantly on the run. The whole series is told from the point of view of their daughter named Hazel, so we know that she survives. And in this volume she is a little bit older and she's an actual character in this volume instead of just being a baby, so that was nice. To be honest, I almost gave up on this series because I didn't enjoy the last few volumes as much as the first 3, but I saw this at the library, so I decided to grab it, and I'm glad that I did because this volume restored my faith in the series. It was fun and it was entertaining. My favorite character, which is Isabel, was back, so I like that. The art is as beautiful as always. I absolutely adore this style, and yeah, there is also LGBTQ+ representation, so that's another plus. So yeah, I gave this volume 4 stars and now I'm definitely more motivated to continue with the series. Next book I read was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. So this was the start of my reread of this series, and actually I'm reading it for the first time in English, in full. I read some of the later volumes in English, but not the whole series, so this is a whole new experience in a way. I grew up with the Czech translation of the series and it is a really good translation, but it also means that a lot of the terminology is completely different. And obviously I'm familiar with part of the terminology like house names and stuff like that, but there were things that I didn't know, so it was a learning experience. Basically, I had a blast rereading this. I absolutely adore this Ravenclaw edition. Obviously this first volume is introductory, but for me that's a big part of the magic, like being in the Diagon Alley and at Hogwarts for the first time. I always liked this volume a lot. I absolutely adore the movie, I've seen it countless times. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars again, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts on this, I have a separate video. I filmed a vlog while reading this, so you can check it out. Next I want to talk about Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina. This book delivered so much more than I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a fun, sexy romance, which it was. But it was so much better than I could expect. This is a friends to lovers story, so Hazel and Josh met in college and Josh is a little bit older than Hazel, and basically Hazel she's a breath of fresh air. She's like out there, eccentric, clumsy and stuff like that. She's unapologetically herself, and somehow she always managed to make a fool out of herself in front of Josh. So when they meet again some years later, because Josh is actually a brother of Hazel's best friend, she considers herself undateable in Josh's eyes, and yeah, Josh thinks that she is a bit too much at the beginning. But Hazel decides that she wants to become his best friend, so they become friends, and as good friends they set each other up on blind dates and they go together, so they have always these double dates. Have I said I love Hazel yet? Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to live with her because she would probably drive me crazy, but I would really like to have someone like her as a friend. Josh was so different from her. He was more calm and collected, but they worked so well together, like their chemistry was through the roof. It has happened to me several times that I really liked a romance and the chemistry between the 2 characters, but I wasn't the biggest fan usually of the male character, but in this case I loved Josh too, so it was great. Seriously, it was so fun and heartwarming. I flew through the audiobook. This is now one of my favorite romances of all time, and I definitely want to check out everything they wrote, because Christina and Lauren are two authors, which I didn't know until very recently. I've seen this book around a lot, and even people who don't normally read or enjoy romances enjoyed this book, and it makes me happy because it's so good. So yeah, this was 5 out of 5 stars. Another book I read in March is Tolstoy by Kathryn Ormsbee, and honestly, I don't think I can explain how much this book meant to me. When I first heard about this book, I was instantly intrigued because of the title. But then I found out that this has asexual representation, which is the main reason I bought it. I was hoping that this book would be something that I could relate to, and boy, was this something I could relate to a lot. This book follows a girl named Tash who makes a web series on YouTube with her friends, and it's called Unhappy Families, and it's based on Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. One day someone big gives them a shout out and they go from 400 subscribers to 40k, I think, which is pretty crazy. So now Tash and her friends have to deal with basically having gone viral overnight. Negative comments and trolls start to appear, so it deals with creating content and everything that goes with it. I haven't dealt with negativity on my stuff that much, but I still could relate a lot to what Tash was feeling. She got caught up in her online activities and in the numbers and both positive and negative comments and stuff like that. And I think it's good to talk about it, because I think that being an online creator is pretty hard to navigate, although like I am a tiny channel, but I got a taste of it and it must be even harder for teenagers, so yeah. Another thing I found relatable was that Tash's grandparents were actually Czech, so there were parts about Czech culture and Czech history and stuff like that, so it was really nice to see. Yet another thing I really liked and could relate was that Tash was vegetarian, and actually I haven't seen much good rep of being a vegetarian or vegan. Sometimes it's really horrible, and I really liked how it was included in this book. It was really natural, like she didn't talk about it, she just mentioned that she went somewhere and what were her options and stuff like that, just what I have to deal with in my life too. Apart from the web series, it was also about her friendships, which were really great, and also about family relationships and about deciding about college and stuff like that. Tash has an online crush which she talks to, and now she has the opportunity to actually meet him in real life, but she's afraid of like how to tell him that she's asexual, and she doesn't know how he will react and if a relationship could even work. Her friends are pretty confused about her being asexual, but they are really supportive. But unfortunately there is one acephobic character, like unfortunately for Tash. I think that it's really good that it was included because it's realistic, because there are people who are acephobic or who think that asexuality isn't a real thing, and they think that people are making it up, and especially teenagers, because often they haven't had that much experience or none, so this was the case. Anyway, normally I don't use that many tabs, but with this book I tapped all the places that were relatable in some way, and I tapped quite a lot. And also I normally just skim read the acknowledgements, but in this one she wrote at the end, "Finally, a special shout out to my ace readers. You are not alone. You are just right, and you are part of the splendid in the splendifying world. Keep being you." And like, oh my god. So yeah, this book was precious and awesome, and I highly recommend you read it. 5 stars. I also read Reasons to Stay Alive by Haig. This is an unvoices non-fiction book about depression and anxiety. It's kind of a mix of things. It's partly his memoir and his story with mental illness, and partly there are facts about mental health, and partly it's also self-help because He mentions some stuff that helped him, and there are some powerful quotes, and there are also stuff that helped other people. I actually read it at the time that I was feeling pretty sad, and I would say that the first part wasn't really helping because it was about his story and it was sad, but I would say that the second part was quite helpful and inspiring, so I would say that it's worth giving it a try if you're interested in this topic or if you think you might need it. I'm also really interested in reading Notes on a Nervous Planet by Haig, which deals with social media and stuff like that, which is something I think I really need. And I ended up giving this 4 stars. And the last thing I read in March was The Knife of Never Letting Go by Ness. So unfortunately, I really didn't click with this book. I know that a lot of people love it and I can see why, but I just couldn't. I had some major problems with it. So this is a young adult dystopian series and we follow a 12-year-old boy named Todd, and he lives in a town where there are only men because all the women died and everybody can hear everybody else's thoughts. So there's this noise and it's not a nice place to live. And one day Todd discovers a place where there is a total silence, which is something that shouldn't be happening, and things escalate from there. The beginning was very hard for me to read and I couldn't get into it. I wasn't really intrigued by the world or the characters, although the premise sounded really interesting, but from the beginning it just wasn't delivering for me. I didn't like the writing with the improper use of grammar and spelling and stuff like that, but I got used to this. As the story progressed, some of the characters grew on me a little bit, but Todd was still kind of annoying and irritating character. I really liked the dog because he was such a pure soul. The truth is that I didn't get what I expected, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the problem was that I really didn't like what I got. So what I got was basically a survival story, so some of the characters were constantly on the run because someone was after them, and it was basically all misery and hopelessness, and then for 2 minutes it was a bit hopeful and then it was miserable again. So the cycle continues and I'm like, what is the point of this book? I thought that the ending would be worth it, but it wasn't. I just didn't like the overall mood of the story. I can see why people love it, but it just really didn't work for me. I felt like the story didn't progress that much. I am mildly interested in what's going to happen, but I don't think it's worth going through another 500 plus page books if I didn't like this one. So yeah, this was a big disappointment. I gave it 2 stars. I really liked The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Ness, and like, I am not giving up on him. I want to try A Monster Calls and More Than This, so hopefully I will enjoy his other books more than this one. But yeah, these are all the books I read in March. Let me know if you read any of these or if you want to, and tell me what was your favorite book of March. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye!